Hey everyone, welcome back to Sanctified Wellness. This is Katie and I'm here with Alexis, and we are excited to jump into our second episode. Our first one was more of an overview. If you didn't catch that one, our first episode, go back and listen to that because that kind of gives a little bit of background as to why we are shifting gears a little bit with our podcast and just a little bit more about our backstory. And we had some fun moments in there chatting about our earlier life and how we got to where we are now. And we're excited to jump into episode 2. We are diving a little bit deeper today into hormones, hormone balance, women's health, postpartum. I am walking through that currently, and pregnancy, and just chatting about some of the things that we have learned over the years, why we're passionate about this subject, and a lot of times too, what is missed in the overall conversation when it comes to health and wellness. And one of the big things is hormones. We're often focusing so much on losing weight, on exercising more, on eating less. And that is really something that I fell into when I was in high school and then into college. And even in my early bodybuilding years, really didn't think about hormones much. I was just grinding away, exercising more, lifting more, manipulating my macros. I mean, I had a pretty good balanced diet at the time, but it really wasn't anything I thought about. I lost my period during my first contest prep, didn't get it back for a year, never really even thought about it. And then I started to have some adaptations, some hormonal issues, and really struggled myself with my hormone journey and just figuring out, okay, what is going wrong? What am I doing wrong? Why do I not feel very good? Why is my weight fluctuating? Why did I lose my cycle? And asking those questions, which really led to discovering a lot more about the female body, about hormones. Obviously, we are not doctors. We are not experts. So seek medical advice. And we would recommend a functional medicine doctor, a holistically minded doctor if you have some hormonal issues yourself. But I hope that our conversation today can just get individuals thinking a little bit more about their own health. How can they be their own advocate? What do they need to look for as far as maybe symptoms of a deeper issue? How can we best recover when it comes to maybe some hormone dysregulation or dysfunction, and also making sure that we're hormonally healthy in order to support a pregnancy, postpartum, which that is something that was very, very important to me as I was looking into the next phase of my life to be pregnant and have a child. And I'm so thankful that that was one thing that I was focusing on in advance were my hormones and making sure that I was in a good place to support a pregnancy. So we're going to kind of dive into that today and discuss a little bit of our own journey as well, and some of the things that we've struggled with over the years and why we're passionate about this. And so we'll jump right in.
Yeah. I think this probably is one of my favorite topics that I somehow slide into like every conversation that I have with my friends, which is you're probably like, shut up. But it is the most important thing, because if we don't understand our hormones, then we can't be advocates for ourselves to be like, okay, I know that something is wrong, so I need to understand just overall general hormones. And I feel like this is kind of a crash course into hormones. If you haven't like dove into this topic, it is so important just to understand so you can know if something's off. And with your hormones, they literally affect everything that your body does, your metabolism, your body weight, bone, heart, brain health, energy, mood, sleep, all of it. So we're going to be covering that. And just, it is so important because I know we were just chatting before jumping on camera that I saw a lot of signs of I had a lot of issues in my younger years, and I talked about that in the last episode, but also I saw my mom have major issues as she was going into menopause. And typically, if you're having issues going into menopause, there was things going on in your fertile years that kind of set you up to have a crappy transition to menopause. And unfortunately, that's usually something is wrong with your hormones. There's some dysregulation, and they present themselves in different ways. And like you were saying, from bodybuilding is how you lost your period. And for me, it was PCOS is how I lost my period. So we had to learn about our hormones so we can get our stuff back on track. And a lot of the times when you go to just a regular doctor or Western medicine, practicing doctor, they're just going to put you on birth control, put you on an IUD, put you on something just to calm your symptoms, but they never actually address what the underlying issue is. And typically all of our hormones, they're all synced together. So they all play off of one another. And it is so important to understand that if you have imbalances, let's just say like in your estrogen, then you're going to have overflow into your other hormones, like your cortisol, your thyroid hormones. It's all going to come up. And I do believe now more in testing. When I was younger, I just didn't do as much blood work as I do now. And I was telling you, like, I am so, now that I'm in my mid 30s, I'm like, I want to make sure that I can have babies. So I am like testing regularly. And I don't think that everyone has to. Some people just don't have hormonal issues, and you guys are blessed. But some people do, and they don't even realize it. On the outside, you can look perfect, but then on the inside, there might be things going on that you don't realize. So I do think testing at least yearly is important to get your blood work done, and just knowing what your ranges are and what your optimal ranges are is so, so important, because everyone's going to be a little bit different, and what works for you is not going to necessarily work for someone else. And when you go to your doctor and they're like, oh no, you're in a normal range. We were talking about this too. You're in a normal range, but that might be out of range for you. So if you go to a functional practitioner, the ranges are a lot smaller that they're going to have you in. And if we see changes within 6 months or something like that, then we know this person is out of their normal range for them. And with your like more Western medicine practicing doctors, the range is huge, and you're also getting compared to the unhealthiest people. So you might look like your ranges are A-okay, but that is actually not the case. Right. So that's super important. And we can touch on just like the key hormones and what they do, just so people can kind of get like a general understanding, I guess, of everything.
Yeah. And one thing I did want to mention too is we, as a society, we're having so many issues with women getting pregnant and staying pregnant. Yes. And I think we have to ask the question, why? Like, what is the underlying cause of this? Now, there's going to be a million things. There's a multitude of things, and it's different for every single person. But when you actually critically think about our generation, millennials, a lot of us, majority of women were put on some sort of birth control, or, a large percentage. I don't want to, be hyperbolic, but a large percentage were put on some sort of birth control. Don't have the exact percentage. But I know I had multiple doctors try to put me on birth control. Now, praise God, I actually got really sick from birth control, so I never could take it. But it was what was used to address. I had some acne in high school and just hormone fluctuations and different things. And so,
which is funny, because acne is also an indicator that something's going on with your hormones. I had horrible acne in high school, like pizza face. Yeah.
Yes. Horrible. So I had these type of pimples called, it's like milia, I think, or millie. Hey. I don't, if you look up different types of pimples, they're essentially under the skin, and they're like hard pimples that you can't get rid of unless you have them extracted. And so it was horrible. It was horrible. I was just like so embarrassed. I tried to put my hair over my forehead because I had all these bumps, and they're not ones that you could actually get rid of. You had to like go to the dermatologist and have them extracted. So then the solution given to me by my doctor was, okay, here's birth control. Well, I got horrendously ill. So then instead of saying, oh, well, maybe we should try something else, it was, well, here's a different form of birth control.
Of course, always.
Yeah. And then I got really sick with that, which actually now makes sense. I'm pretty sensitive in terms of hormonal fluctuations because I got really sick when I was pregnant. Yeah. So now, that makes sense. My body just with the shifts in hormones, it can create, hormones are so powerful with mood, how you feel, your energy, all of your sleep, everything. And so, taking these symptoms and just masking them, it's like, you have a fire and you're just like throwing, you're not actually putting out the fire. You're just like, ignoring it, putting up like some sort of a sheet in front of it and just ignoring that the fire's there. And I was going to cover my eyes. So, we have to ask the question, okay, why is it that we're having so many issues with fertility and with women getting pregnant, staying pregnant, such low progesterone overall? Yes. Which those are some of the hormones you want to address, looking at your estrogen levels, your progesterone, cortisol, your thyroid. And that's not just your TSH, that's also T3, that's also T4. If you have thyroid issues, looking at your antibodies, which can be elevated, which may indicate that you have some sort of a thyroid issue, your insulin, your blood sugar. So all of these things are data points that can kind of give you an idea and understanding of what's going on beneath just those symptoms of low energy, of maybe you're having crazy periods, you're having painful periods. And so that's why we're saying too, it's going to be different for every single person. And it's important to really look at it from an individual perspective. Overall, if we take a step back and we look at, okay, we had diet culture in the early 2000s. We had low fat diets in the early 2000s. We had more cardio. I mean, when I first got into bodybuilding, the popular thing to do was not a macronutrient based diet or a flexible dieting plan with minimal cardio and focusing on weightlifting. It was 900 calories a day. It was 2 cardio sessions a day. It was no fat. It was pretty much just protein, tuna, and protein from fish sources, which I have no idea why my
probably the low fat, maybe.
It was
I don't know.
Wild. I remember I was given a diet plan when I was like 19 years old. And later on, I calculated the calories and it was 900 calories. It was, I think, like 200 grams of protein, under 15 grams of fat in that day. So think about a 19-year-old girl eating less than 15 grams of fat in an entire day. That is just asking for hormonal problems, because fats are essential for healthy hormones and for appetite regulation. And that's another thing. I was put on this plan. Well, then I started struggling with binge eating because I was starving myself. Yeah. And then it creates too a lot of dysregulation in ghrelin, in leptin. So those are hormones that help regulate your appetite and regulate how full you feel. And so if those are thrown off, then you are going to feel ravenous. You are going to feel like you're just going to go eat the entire kitchen. And so a lot of times it's not just emotional. I mean, we think about binging as emotional eating. Yes, that can be a component, but a lot of times it is absolutely a physical, your hormones are all messed up. And so it's actually a physiological reality that you are very ravenous, you're hungry, your body senses that something is off. I mean, think about it, how God created our bodies to survive. And so if we're malnourished, then we are going to really have a dysregulation of our appetite, of our full we are, our cravings. And so, we have to take a step back and look at what are these things that we did, let's say a lot of us millennials in our teens and our teens, that created this unhealthy dynamic within our thyroid, our estrogen, progesterone, and our period is a kind of, think of it as like a monthly report card as far as just an overall perspective of, okay, where are my hormones at this month? A lot of our reproductive hormones. And a lot of times if our period is disrupted, if it's heavy, if it's painful, that's an indication that something is off. And so taking a look at these different levels is really important for overall not only our fertility and being able to get pregnant, stay pregnant, and have children, but also too your metabolism, your body weight, your overall health, your hair. I mean, when my hormones have been wonky, I've had thinning hair. I have had dry skin. I've been freezing all the time. I've had just crazy, weird symptoms, more acne, some hormonal acne on my chin. And so it's more than just, okay, can I get pregnant? It's also your day-to-day life. Are you able to function without downing the energy drinks that are feeling like you're burning the candle at both ends?
Yeah. No, 1,000%. Well, and it's so interesting too, because I think when it comes to your period and PMS, because it's so normal now, or so common that now it's normal, and women really think like, oh, like I'm just PMSing before my period, like, I become a whole different person. And like that actually is not normal at all. But we have just been told, because it's so common, and we see that because women's hormones are so dysregulated, like, oh, you're just having crazy PMS. I'm like, that is not normal. And I had mentioned in the first episode that my functional practitioner put me on a bioidentical progesterone that's natural, that I take. It's orally every single night. And then first she wanted me to start out like with my natural cycle of like when I am ovulating, but then we stretched it out to the full like 30 days in the month. But it is crazy because I have realized I have been so depleted in progesterone for so long that you get used to just crazy fatigue the first couple days of my period, where I'm like, I can't even get out of bed, and I have to like go work a whole day and I'm, just like trying to find the energy. And I always tell people I'm a very high energy person. Like I get stuff done. Like I am like, I can be everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
But those first 2 or 3 days, I'm like, if I could just not leave my bed for 3 days. And I was not like that until more recently when I started realizing that I actually had some major hormonal dysregulations going on. And it pushed me to be like, I have to figure this out. And estrogen dominance is such a big deal because we're getting these like estrogen mimickers from so many different things, like our perfumes, our hair products, our makeup, and all those things. And I know that there is this big shift to that more clean beauty, which I absolutely love. And funny thing is, sidebar, my dad growing up, because I had such bad acne, he was like, you do not put like unnatural makeup on your face. It's going to make you break out more. Not knowing also that it was like an internal thing going on too. So I can't remember the first like natural makeup brand, but they're still around. I can't think of their name right now. But anyways, that's what my dad, he would only buy me that. And it's expensive. That was like the first only company. And now there's a lot of other ones, but you still have to check, things. And if you can find like organic versions of that, that would be better. So I thought it was so interesting. But anyways, we're getting so many estrogens from so many different places. So we're going to have these elevated estrogen levels and it's going to start suppressing our progesterone. So then we turn into these psychopaths right before our period. And we think like, oh, I'm just a girl. Like, I'm like, that is not normal. Like you should not have like major personality shifts around your cycle. So it definitely is telling you that something is going on. And typically, like you had mentioned, that we just like have low progesterone as a society, and women are having a hard time getting pregnant because of that, because progesterone is what sustains you getting pregnant and staying pregnant, because you can't ovulate if you don't have enough progesterone. And if you're really thinking about your overall health, especially in the future, like you need to ovulate to produce progesterone. So then when you go into menopause, you have enough progesterone to sustain you to have a healthy menopause. But if you're not ovulating monthly now, you're not building up those progesterone stores. And that's really, really important for like longevity, not just thinking about right here, right now. And a lot of women don't even think, and those are just obviously reproductive hormones, but a lot of women don't even think about their hormones until something is going wrong, or until someone's not getting pregnant, or until, my fatigue is so crazy, or my cortisol is so high that I'm stressing myself into like, into a crazy person, which I experienced that last year, where I was like, okay, I think something's going on. And my cortisol was like through the roof. And then it was affecting all my other hormones. It affected my thyroid, pushing me into hypothyroidism. And then obviously having PCOS, I'm always going to have this metabolic fight with trying to keep my insulin levels at a normal amount and range. And I know that like I don't necessarily do like a low carb diet or anything like that, but I'm very conscious of like the sugars that I'm intaking and where they're coming from and what sources. Like I'd rather choose like honey over, I don't know, just like, a refined sugar or something like that. Even when I bake now, I'm putting in honey or maple syrup, or just trying to get it from natural sources, which our body is familiar with natural sources of these things. And it's not familiar with like man-made versions or bleach and chemically dyed and all these things. So those can affect your hormones too. Your food, like you were saying, is a big component. And we're also seeing that shift where people are like being hyper conscious of where their food is coming from, what the source is, and trying to take out the extra crap that we don't need in our food that really is hurting our bodies, and going just to like, to like just how God created food. And people, there's this, I love this shift that's happening, because I'm having conversations with people who literally never cared about this stuff. And I'm like, this is so cool. And then I also have some of my friends' moms who are like, well, I did all those things and I had 3 healthy pregnancies and I'm in menopause and I'm perfect. I'm like, yeah, but you also were growing up in a different time where you didn't have to like fight for your life to not have like 700 chemicals in one product, and you're using 10 different products in a day. There's we are battling so much now that we have to be hyper conscious. And I don't think that people should be scared of everything, but like having a good working knowledge of how your body works, I think that's how we can steward our bodies well. And, the Lord made this information available to us so we can understand ourselves more. And I feel like that's an important thing. Like we should all be taught how do our bodies work? And then how can I support my health as best as I can? And I don't think you have
Right.
to go buy the most expensive supplements and go like only buy like all organic food. Like I prefer to do those things, but I don't think that is realistic for everyone, especially if you have a big family. And I think there are ways, but you know, it's not realistic for everyone. But if you're still choosing like to eat a steak over going to McDonald's, you're still making a better choice, whether that's regenerative meat or this or that. Like I may prefer those things. But if you're choosing that over fast food, you're still making a good choice for your health and your
Right.
hormones too. So I think that's
Yeah,
important to note as well.
for sure. And I think making sure that we're not crossing over the line into almost like this orthorexia
Yes. Yeah.
perspective where we're
Yeah.
so fearful of everything
Right.
that actually it's like, are your cortisol levels through the roof because you're so stressed out
Yeah.
about every single little minuscule thing
Yes.
that you're
Yep.
doing? Because
Probably.
yeah, because a lot of it can be easy to get there.
Yeah.
But I think what's important to remember is that a lot of these things are free. Like
Yeah.
if you're doing the basics with your exercise, with your stress balance, you're trying to get enough sleep. I mean, I will say as a
Yeah.
mom, it is very challenging to
Yeah.
get enough sleep. So, you know, obviously if you have young kids, it's you do what you can and
Right.
God will meet you where you're at and what you
Yeah.
can't do too. So I think,
Mhm.
you know, making sure that we're not striving for perfection, but instead
Yes,
we're
exactly.
looking at it from, okay, a holistic perspective, but how are we going to really, you know, as believers, listen to the Holy Spirit as he's convicting us of different things.
Mhm.
It's not like you and I got here overnight. It
No.
took years and years and years and years to understand a lot of these things, have challenges in our own lives that then our eyes were open to, oh my gosh, you know, the impact of using plastics all the time and
Right. Yep.
having these hormone disruptors, fragrances, and all of these different
Yeah.
things. I mean, I used to be the fragrance queen. Like I worked for Bath and Body Works. I worked there in the corporate office. Yeah.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
was like obsessed. I worked in the soaps and sanitizers
Okay.
department in finance before I quit my job to coach.
Yeah.
And so I was like fragrance queen, like all the
Yeah.
candles, all the soaps,
Yeah.
all the, you know, sprays and everything. And
Mhm.
okay, yeah, and was that not good? No, it was not good. But you know,
Right.
it's not like overnight all of a sudden I went from this like
Mhm.
fragrance,
Mhm.
you know, drinking all the energy drinks and all the you know,
Yeah.
eating tons of chemicals. I mean, I used to eat
Yeah.
like kind of a crap diet. Then going from that to all of a sudden like super crunchy, holistic,
Right.
never it's like, no, it's a process for everyone. And I don't
Yes.
think that I think that's a really important part of the health journey is recognizing that it's healing is like step by step,
Mhm.
day by day. It's not going to be like all of a sudden you just throw out everything in your house. I mean, we're still exposed to so much every single day. I mean, think
Oh
about
yeah.
like the just, you know, we could go on and on. It's like, I'm sure the crunchy community would yell at me for the pants I'm wearing and the clothes
Yeah.
that I wear and,
I
you know,
know.
all the things I do, some of the things that I still eat or what, you know, because it's not
Yeah.
organic and all these things. And it's like,
Right.
okay, we have to give ourselves grace. We have to understand
Yes.
too, it's not a black and white, like good
Mhm.
versus evil. It's just a how are we doing these things, making these changes ultimately to glorify God? Because
Right.
it's not about ourselves. It's not
Mhm.
about like, how can I be the best crunchy influencer on Instagram and have all the
Right.
followers and the likes? It's
Yeah.
how am I stewarding my body and my health and my wellness to the glory of God? And
Yeah.
ultimately, like we want to be fruitful and multiply, have
Yeah.
children and raise godly children. And
Mhm.
that's one of our desires, God willing. And so that should be more of our perspective of, okay, we don't want to do
Yeah.
these things to have all this control and these, you know,
Right.
just like an iron grip on our health, but rather, okay, we're making these changes in order to glorify God, to be healthier, to have more energy, to be strong, to be a great example for others to see then
Yeah.
Christ in us through these different things. So I think
Mhm.
that's a perspective to have because that's lost
Awesome.
in a lot of these circles. And especially some of the health focused circles, it's very inwardly focused and how can we biohack everything and have the
Yeah.
longest life and everything. And I'm like, I really don't want to live to be 100 if I, you know, no, but honestly, like if I'm not glorifying God, like what does it matter if I live a
Mhm.
few more years, you know, at the end of my
It
life or
doesn't.
you know whatever it may be? And so,
Yeah.
kind of keeping that perspective is super important. But
Mhm.
I think also remembering, like as I mentioned before, a lot of these things are free, and so how can you best, you don't have to go out and buy all the super expensive supplements and
No.
everything from Whole Foods. I mean, you can get organic things at Aldi, you can get organic things at
Yeah.
Walmart. Yeah. And I started shopping at Aldi pretty much for probably 80% of our food,
Yeah.
just because it is a lot cheaper and you can get a lot of organic things.
Yeah.
But making sure too, as we talked about, exercise and sleep
Yes.
and balance with your stress too. We're so on these things all the time, our phones. We're
Yes.
on these all the time. And it's like, okay, how much time are you spending on your phone? How much screen time are you? So these different lifestyle things that we can do that actually affect our hormones, which is interesting.
yes.
It's not just about, okay, the supplement you're taking. Actually, you're going to make a better impact on your hormones by sleeping well, by getting sunlight, by exercising, eating a nutrient dense plate, and having a really good whole foods diet. That's going to be so much more important. That's like, those are the big rocks in your, you think about I don't know if you've ever seen the analogy. They do it at church, I feel like, all the time, where you have a container, and how do you best optimize it with like these different size rocks? Well, you put the big ones in first. And so, because then the small ones can kind of fit around the big ones in a container. Whereas if you put the small ones in, the big ones aren't going to fit. So what are those big boulders in your life? Well, exercise, it's going to be nutrition, it's going to be sleep, it's going to be your stress balance, it's going to be making sure you're getting micronutrients, you're getting the different, whatever it is that you need to get from a supplement. It's going to be different for every single person too. And that's why testing is important too, to see where you're missing the mark. And it's not just an overnight thing. It's a process, and it's slow, and it's frustrating, and it's different for every single person. And that's too why I think, as much as social media is great, and it's one thing, there's a lot of benefits of social media, but there is a tendency to, it's clickbaity. Do this and your hormones will be fixed. Buy this supplement, your hormones will be fixed. And it's like, no, not really. They're just trying to sell you something. Unfortunately, it's a longer process, and it's a lot more customized to each person than just one thing that's going to make all the difference.
No, 100%. And that is so important to remember, that a lot of that stuff is clickbait, and your hormones didn't get disrupted overnight, so they're not going to get fixed overnight. And that's the biggest thing to remember, is that it is going to take a long time. Like, I feel like it took me at least 3 months just to start feeling normal again, but I had been consistent. And a lot of times people will take a supplement, but they don't change their lifestyle habits. And like you were saying about the stones, like, if you don't have that foundational work of all the things that you had mentioned, those supplements are going to do nothing for you, because that's just to supplement your healthy lifestyle and those changes that you make. And a lot of the time people do want a quick fix because of the society that we live in, which is, it's normal now. Now you can take a shot to lose weight. Like that is so, it's just normalized, but it doesn't fix all the other issues. And even when speaking about people who are overweight and battling these metabolic disorders, I'm like, there is an underlying cause for that. So a shot is not going to fix whatever the underlying causes are, because there is a reason why that body is doing that. And yes, obviously overeating and some of those things could come into play, but I think for a lot of women who are struggling, especially with that midsection lower abdomen weight gain, they are struggling with estrogen dominance. So when you're gaining weight in certain areas of your body, it's your body is telling you there's something off. And a lot of times it's like, oh, like I tried crash dieting and I did all these things, and I whatever, and nothing works. I'm like, yeah, your body is literally screaming at you and being like, please help and do something, because what you're doing right now is not working. So I always tell people, like, a lot of I can't remember the percent, but a lot of Americans struggle with at least one type of metabolic disorder. And I personally believe that insulin resistance is like one of the biggest, especially with so many women who have PCOS. And that is a major, major issue. And I think that is also why it's so important to look at your diet and look at the foods that you're eating and really trying to reduce those refined sugars. Stop getting the sugary Starbucks drink. Like, those aren't doing anything for your health on top of the chemicals that are in them and all the sugar that's in it. And I'm not one to say I love baking. If anyone has watched me on Instagram, I love baking, but I also think that there's a time and place for those things, and there's swaps that you can make so you don't have to put in other things, like all the refined sugar and stuff like that. But that's super important to recognize. But speaking about supplementation, I guess we can kind of dive into that because we wanted to talk about some other things after that too. So supplement wise, like I definitely am a little bit more of a supplement person, but like I said, stacking that on top of my lifestyle habits that I have created over the course of 10 to 12 years, realizing that like my body is jacked up. So I have to get 8 hours of sleep and I have to make sure I hydrate and eat really well. So for me, like, I guess the big ones that I think that a lot of people should be taking, and just women in general, are magnesium. That will really help with like cortisol and just relaxing and sleep. I take magnesium glycinate at night. That's really good for like supporting your hormones as well. Vitamin D, I think a lot of people always think like immune and like immunity when they think of like vitamin D or they think of sunshine, but that is like a big building block for your hormones as well. So vitamin D was also what my functional practitioner, she put me on a crazy high dose of vitamin D. And I have a prescription for that. It's just regular vitamin D, but just like a super high dose. I'm at 50,000 IUIs. And so I take that and I'm like, oh, but women with PCO have chronically low vitamin D outside every single day. And I'm like, how do I have low vitamin D? And my, I take a methylated multivitamin. And I'm like, that's vitamin D in it too. How am I low in vitamin D? She's like, you have PCOS. Like you were born to have chronically low vitamin D. I'm like, I do all the things. So that was only a 12-week, that's just like a 12-week protocol that she has me on to bump me up, and then we'll retest it. And then omega-3s, super, super important, especially for inflammation. I think a lot of people are also fighting inflammation. And I know for me personally, that was a big thing that also played into all of my other health issues that were going on. And then a probiotic, prebiotic, it kind of depends on like how you want to get it. I personally like to do fermented foods, and kefir is the way that I like to get my probiotics. Okay. Yeah. And I used to buy one, but I just think that like you can just get more bacterias from like different things. So I'm like, okay, I need like all the other ones. Yeah. So I just kind of switch depending. Like right now I have a really tasty strawberry kefir in my fridge that I drink every morning. And I'm also like a little bit lactose intolerant, and that has helped a lot with that. I read that if you drink kefir every day, it can help with the lactose intolerance and like bloating. So, and I personally have noticed it because I have major bloating issues. Like when I eat, like my stomach just, it's really weird. So I think those are really important, foundational. Do you have more like foundational supplements that you like or take?
You pretty much checked all the boxes. I will say getting a good multivitamin that has a methylated form of folic acid is something that I think a lot of times we forget. So folic acid, like a manufactured folic acid, a lot of individuals cannot actually absorb any of it because it is not the methylated form. Oh gosh, now I'm forgetting the MTFR. Is that the gene? I'm like, wait, I did write it down.
There's so many letters.
Now I'm like, oh, so many letters, which I have no idea if I have that or not. But a lot of individuals do, and they don't know it. And actually that you cannot properly utilize the folic acid, and it's not going to be, essentially, you're not going to absorb any of it if you have that gene. So making sure you have a methylated form of folic acid, especially for pregnancy and for postpartum and, you know, just overall your health in general. I think a good multivitamin is one thing that is pretty easy to do, and you're just kind of checking all the boxes with that. I take Needed. Actually, they have a powder form, and Needed is a supplement company that is really good. They have different supplements for pre-pregnancy, like fertility, pregnancy, and then postpartum. So I would recommend that one. And I mean, it really does kind of depend on the individual. So those, I think we just covered the basics, but I will say too, one thing that this isn't supplementation, but I forgot to mention when we were talking about nutrition is you mentioned insulin. Well, okay, so when we're thinking about nutrition, how are we optimizing blood sugar balance? And that's really important. And a lot of times what I've seen in my decade of coaching are these meals that are very high in sugar, low in fat, or very high in, you know, one micronutrient, and low in another, not much protein. These individuals think that, oh, well, I'm just having a snack and it's going to give me energy. Well, a lot of times what it's doing is that it's actually spiking your blood sugar and you're having this high and then a crash. Well, in order to optimize blood sugar balance, which is something that majority of Americans deal with, and then it's going to affect your energy. It's going to affect your appetite. It's going to affect your insulin. It's going to affect all of these different things. Well, in order to optimize blood sugar balance, really important to have some sort of a good balance in terms of protein, carbs, and fat. So when you think about a meal, are you having especially protein and fat? Fat is going to be the slowest macronutrient to digest, and it's going to stabilize your blood sugar. It's also really good for your hormones. When we think about hormone optimum, I'm just going to say optimizing hormones. Yeah. So I'm going to try to say that like 5 times and mess it up. Optimizing hormones, really focusing on your protein and your fats. Now, of course, carbohydrates, and we're not anti-carb at all. No. But thinking about those two first, that's really what's going to help with that blood sugar balance. And women in general are chronically under eating protein. Chronically under. I mean, I will tell you, probably 75% of people that have come to me for coaching are under eating protein. And that's fitness-minded individuals. So when you're thinking about protein, you want to think about optimizing your portions of protein with each meal. That's also going to spike muscle protein synthesis, which essentially means you're getting enough protein to build muscle. And if you're lifting weights, you want to make sure that you are not just kind of throwing that down the drain, that you are really replenishing those amino acids, and you're making sure that you are doing what you need to do to optimize muscle building. And so if you're not getting at least 25 grams of protein per meal, I'd say that's probably a safe bet. 25 to 30. That should be something that everyone's shooting for, making sure you're getting some sort of healthy fat with each meal would be my recommendation. I mean, of course, there's exceptions if you're just like getting a quick snack right before a lift or something. But even just like 5 grams of fat from an omega supplement, or, having 1 egg with that meal to get 4 to 5 grams of fat, that is going to actually help with that blood sugar balance and making sure that you are staying steady as opposed to having kind of these peaks and valleys when it comes to your blood sugar. And that's something I think a lot of people miss. I'm going to say, I know we're getting in the weeds with some of these supplementations and all of these different things, but the majority of individuals really are not taking responsibility for what they're putting into their bodies. And I will say I get a lot of questions from just general people about nutrition. And I ask, well, what are you eating? And when I look at actually what they're putting into their body, it's a lot of processed food. It's not very high in protein. It's not very high in healthy fats and complex whole sources of carbohydrates and nutrient-rich foods. And so we really have to take responsibility. And, we like to blame external sources, big food, big pharma. Yes, they play a role in how we think about food, how we think about pharmaceuticals, all of these things. Yes, there's propaganda. Yes, there's things that influence our perspective. But when we take a step back and we really think about, okay, what does it mean to live a holistic life? We're not going to be eating a lot of processed food. We're not going to be just snacking all day. We're not going to be, just living off energy drinks. You really have to kind of get down to the basics. And it's not fun. It's really not, because you have to take a look at your own lifestyle and your own habits and bad habits and think about, okay, what is it that I'm doing that's not supporting optimal hormones when it comes to my nutrition? And a lot of times it is, unfortunately, just a disordered perspective of actually what we're intaking. So a recommendation I would make too is track your food. How many calories are you eating? How much protein are you eating per day? How many grams of fat are you eating per day? And a lot of times you actually will be surprised at what your macronutrients look like when you track them, when you weigh out your food, when you're actually having accountability. And so it's not easy, and that's the thing too. It's a gradual process. It's step by step. It's not going to be overnight, but taking responsibility for sure is very important, in addition to those supplements and some of those things that we just talked about.
Yeah, no, 100%. I always laugh because when I go to the grocery store or something and I see oh, this is high protein, I just like to kind of look, see, because everyone's like high protein, everything. And it'll be 10 grams. I'm like, maybe that's high protein for a kid that's 2.
Right.
But for me, a high protein snack is around 20 to 25 grams, and my meals are usually around 50 grams.
Right. Same.
And I remember being so afraid of like eating 50 grams of protein in one sitting, like thinking I was going to turn into like a full muscle. Like, I don't know why, but that was like on my when I was first getting into like nutrition and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, especially women, and as we age, we don't like process that protein as well. So we actually need more as we get old. And I've just over the years have just bumped up. And I'm like, okay, this is like what I like. And I know it's hard for some people to get enough protein, but I do feel like if that is the case, I know for me, like I can easily eat 150 grams of protein, but if I'm really trying to hit that 200 mark, like I also have to do a protein shake or like putting protein powder in like Greek yogurt or something like that. And speaking of, to put you on the spot, you are a core nutrition sponsored athlete. So what's your discount code and what's their website? Just plug that.
Yeah. Well, so so that's something too. For sure, I'd say I recommend a protein supplement if you can't meet your protein needs. I would say first and foremost, whole sources are the best. And so I'm a little bit different when it comes to pushing supplements. I'm not going to tell everyone they need protein powder, but if you do struggle to meet your protein needs, it is a great way to meet your protein needs. So my favorite form is a whey isolate. Typically, that's going to be easier to digest for most individuals. And so Core Nutritionals, my discount code is Katie20. You can get 20% off. And that's typically I have one protein. Usually I start my day with a protein shake because it's just quick and easy. And so a lot of times I mix, don't recommend this because I know that this isn't health advice or anything, but this is what I do. I usually do raw milk. I usually do a raw egg yolk, and then I do the whey isolate protein powder.
Nice.
Typically blend that up with my omega supplement, and that's how I usually start my day. So Core Nutritionals, whey isolate, and then sometimes I do their blends as well.
Yeah.
And one thing I did want to mention too, I think we're going to have to do another episode when it comes to pregnancy and postpartum because we didn't get to that today.
Yeah. Definitely. We'll dive into that for sure.
I know we had a lot to talk about, but usually we have too much on our list to talk about, and then we don't end up getting to it all. But we'll have to have like a pregnancy for that sort of episode coming up, because I know a lot of our listeners are in that season of life, either pregnancy or trying to get pregnant, postpartum, breastfeeding, which that's something that I have now become very interested in and passionate about because of my own journey with breastfeeding, and I'm exclusively breastfeeding my son, and so it's been very interesting and eye-opening. But well, anyways, all that being said, one thing I did want to mention too about hormones, this is something that really was a key for myself. So I've always had a tendency to over-exercise. That's just been, I love exercise, love training hard. I used to be a track athlete in middle school, high school, and then I was injured. So we talked about that in our previous episode, but I've always loved exercise. And so one thing in my bodybuilding years, and I think a lot of women who think more is better, that's not the case. A lot of times, too much exercise is going to actually create elevated cortisol levels consistently throughout the day. If you're doing let's say two workout sessions a day, or you're doing a lot of high intensity exercise in addition to your weight training sessions, way too much for the majority of women. We are not created to, men respond really well to tons of hard work. Their testosterone goes up in general. I mean, I'm being general here, but their hormones actually respond a lot more optimally to a lot of heavy lifting, hard work. I mean, obviously they need rest and recovery too, but we are much more delicate. And so can we train really hard? Absolutely. But should we be lifting 4 or 5 days a week and doing high intensity training and doing some sort of sprinting workout? And no, we should not. Majority of women should not be doing that. And I will say, from my own personal experience too, the majority of times when I have lost my cycle or had hormone issues, it is from exercising just too much and not meeting my caloric needs. So that's something too, if you tend to be maybe similar to me, where you have competed in bodybuilding, you tend to over-exercise, you tend to push yourself, and literally you get some sort of weird satisfaction from killing yourself in a workout like I do. You have to check yourself and make sure, are you doing 3-hour sessions in the gym?
Yeah.
Probably cut those back. Like if you're a single individual and you have that time, which, I mean, who does know? As we're in our 30s, we're like, what?
No.
What is that life?
My body does not respond the same anymore.
No.
I can train 3 days a week and that is literally it. And I can put on actually muscle than I did training 5-6 days. Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of times we're spinning our wheels. We're thinking we're doing more and it's leading to better results when actually we're putting our bodies under tremendous stress. We're not recovering as well. We're not going to actually optimize muscle building because we're not recovering from our sessions. Majority of my clients over the years, I'd say optimal is 4 sessions per week. If you're looking, 3 to 5, but the majority right around that 4 mark. And you really have to think about, okay, am I doing a ton of HIIT training plus lifting plus and have a stressful job, not getting enough sleep? You are throwing your hormones completely out of whack. And so we have to look 100%. At the amount of exercise that we are doing. And that's where it can be helpful to have like a individual consultation with a coach or with a trainer or something like that to see, have a professional look at what I'm doing and give me some tweaks in your training program. Because it's going to be different for every single person, how old you are, how many kids you have, what your job is, etc. But I will say that is one thing that really impacted me was anytime I start adding running into my training program or high intensity work, my body can't handle it. So I only walk. That is my cardio. I go for walks. I pray. I look at the sky. I have a great time with my son because he loves walks too. And I don't do, I don't run. I don't do, which, not that running is, you can't do that if you're an athlete. Right. Yes, you absolutely can't, but you can't do everything. So there has to be a give and take. And that a lot of times can throw off hormones. I've seen that in some of my clients in my own life, getting that balance with low intensity exercise and high intensity exercise.
1,000%. Amen to that. I guess before we leave, I just want to give you guys just 5 practical things that you can apply to your life that you can take away from this episode. So 1, I think, would be prioritizing your rest and your stress management. And you can include sleep in that too. Also, eat to support your hormones and make sure that you're aware of the food that you're bringing or putting into your body. 3, listen to your body. And like you were saying, you don't need to push yourself so hard in all these workouts because a lot of the times it's actually causing more harm than good. 4, I guess we can put it in again, is just sleep quality too is really important. Making sure you're getting enough sleep and then you have good sleep hygiene, which we can talk about in another episode. And then last, I think it's so important to track your cycle. You need to know where you're at in your cycle and also track your food. Those are 2 big things. I know people don't like to do it, but it is essential. And I just think it's some of the most important stuff. So I hope that this episode has given you a lot of information that you can take away that's helpful for all of you guys. And we'll see you in a couple weeks for another episode. Bye.
Bye.